That cute little baby of yours is growing up, but that's when the real work begins. Dr. Behrooz Bernous, a mental health and family law consultant, has more on parenting. Dr. Bernous, it is always so good to see you. Thank you so much for your time, and you're back here to help us figure out kids.
Hello, Shavi, and it's good to be with you and your viewers as well as your listeners.
I find this appropriate. I moved locations to record this podcast with you. I am now sitting in the oldest of my four children's bedroom. And as I came in here and I started to set up to do this recording, which I come to you to ask for advice and guidance when it comes to kids. Unfortunately, those babies come out and they do not come with a manual. I wish they came with a book. We can go to chapter 1, chapter 2. I look at this almost 9-year-old boy's room right now, and I realize and I look back of how much I have been through with him. And I have this knot in my belly that I have a feeling my hardest years to come with this sweet, sweet, sweet little boy is on the horizon for me. We last time spoke about those cute little babies when they come out and you just want to pinch their cheeks and what was really happening in their development. And I want you to go back and remind us for those who didn't get, and I hope they can go back and listen to the whole podcast because it was great information. But we continue this conversation today that once they're done with that milk and the spit up, and now they're on legs and arms and they're running around, what is really happening in their development and how do we do this? How do we do this?
Well put. Actually, it's good that you mentioned. I thought we can do a quick recap of what we talked about in our previous podcast. If you don't mind, we can call it Parenting 1. We can call what we're doing today Parenting 2. Parenting 1 was like from age 0, from the time they're born, until about age 1, 1.5. Today in Parenting 2, we will cover from 1, 1.5, all the way to 18. Okay, so kind of briefly summarizing the last conversation we had, and for those who are just starting with this podcast and haven't had the chance to listen to the first one, we talked about why the first few years of development for a human child is so important, why parents' roles and tasks are so significant, so important in shaping a healthy child, to raising a healthy child who can then face life's challenges. So we talked about how the first, what we call separation anxiety, is experienced by a human infant is birth itself, because the baby is taken out of this secure, safe place where he and she felt one with the mother. And suddenly now is faced with both sources of anxiety from inside and from outside. Suddenly I'm faced with this world. I'm completely and absolutely dependent on my mother, primarily, and then maybe secondarily on the father. And what are the do's and the don'ts for the mother and or for both parents to do to help this child gradually get to know his or her world? And we talked about how the mother's primary task, other than, of course, feeding and changing the baby, is to introduce this world to the baby, to make this world understandable and digestible, to make sense of this world. So we did talk about these things because now this is going to transition into now, what does the same mother need to do when now her child has become a toddler? And or before we even get to that, as you know, as a mother, and most of your viewers who are parents or are expecting to be parents know that almost around age 1, a child learns how to walk. Girls a little bit sooner, earlier than boys, but right around age 1, they learn how to walk. Before that, they're crawling, they're climbing, but then they eventually learn to walk. Now, why is this important? Because this is primarily the first step for that child to begin to part with mother, to be able to move around and not just wait for mommy to bring the toy to the child, to learn to move away from maybe his crib, and to move around the room, to explore his or her environment, to get to know the world, right? And then they begin to say a word or two, so they begin to be able to talk. So they are taking the initial steps towards that relative independence we talked about, because we said we move from absolute dependence, which is only for babies, for infants, to relative autonomy and independence throughout life. No one is completely ever independent, relatively independent. So as this child now is about age 1.5, is able to walk and is able to talk and communicate, of course, with broken words, he begins to get both excited and scared, okay? Because as what Margaret Mahler was a child psychoanalyst who came up with this interesting term called separating individuating or separation individuation.
Mm-hmm.
She called it first phase of separating from parents and becoming an individual, which happens around sometime between age 2 and 3.
That's
Right?
early. I feel like that's so early.
It is early, but that's what happens to a child, because as they begin to know that, see, at the beginning, a mother is seen not only as a mirror because it reflects back to the child what's happening in the child. The mother is also seen as what Heinz Kohut called self-object, meaning mother is seen as my own extension, not as a separate person, the other. They don't understand self and me or not me, self and the other, not yet. Until they reach this age, they begin to see that mommy and I are not one, but we are very closely related. And mommy, I have come to understand and accept mommy is very trustworthy. And then, of course, daddy too. So mommy is not my extension. Mommy is another individual, separate individual with her own needs and wishes, but mommy is very reliable. Mommy is here to protect me. And the mother who is aware of healthy parenting, mindful parenting, is able to help me become gradually but progressively more and more independent from her, so I can find my own self.
So we want to, as a parent, we want to be able to encourage that for them to figure out that you are your own little person, because we tend to want our babies to be attached to us. Don't ever leave us. You're my baby forever.
Absolutely. The short answer is yes. But the better answer is for me to explain it a little bit more. See, it's natural and almost automatic for a mother and or father to want to stay close to their children and hold on to them, protect them from all sorts of or sources of harms outside. But since it's impractical, nor is it desirable that we protect them or overprotect them, we have to allow them and in fact encourage and facilitate, right? And help them through this transition to become gradually. But as you will see, and you have seen it with your children, during this phase that Mahler called separating, individuating, you will see that children face what we call ambivalence, or simple term for this, having mixed feelings. So on one hand, they're excited about these newly kind of acquired abilities and skills to talk and walk and to go and pick up my toy or my ball and do things, if necessary, go get a cookie so I don't have to wait for mommy. On one hand, I'm excited about these abilities I have. I'm not so dependent. On the other hand, they get anxious because what they worry about is leaving the security that they had while they were very close to mom and or dad. Okay? So you see this back and forth among children who are about 2.5, or even 3 years old, okay? Mahler called this, see, she broke it down to 3 subphases. She said the first subphase is called practicing. Like we all do, we practice before we get good at something, right? So what a toddler does, he or she practices moving away from mom and or dad and do things on my own. But then you have seen that they sometimes run back to mommy.
Yes, all the time.
Even if they move away from mom, they look and to see, make sure that mommy still is there or daddy is there or whoever is my primary caretaker.
Okay.
So she called this practicing. Awareness of this, parents who know this, not only accept it, allow it. But what you just said, an overprotective parent, an overly anxious mother or father would react to the child's anxiety and would encourage the child to come back and stay and not go anywhere. See, honey, I told you don't do this. You're not ready yet, or you're going to break this, or you're going to get yourself hurt, or you're going to fall from the stairs. Yes, we do take measures to make sure our children are safe and they're safely moving away from us, but not becoming overprotective.
What
Because
happens if we are overprotective with them? Because we don't want them to get hurt. And I tend to be more of a mom, especially when you have multiple kids and you get to the fourth one. I just
Mhm.
wait to see, I'm being truthfully, brutally honest. I'm waiting for like blood or something. And then you jump. With the first kid, I tend to find parents are very just hovering over the child all the time. And to no fault of their own, it's the first kid. You have multiple children at the fourth one. You're just like, are you okay, honey?
Right. Practice, right? So absolutely. See, your question primarily was what happens if we overprotect?
Mm,
What we do is see children just by their nature and because of their limitations and limited capabilities they have, they're already anxious, rightfully anxious about facing this world outside without my mom or without as much help as I used to get. So they're already anxious. If we get anxious too, we add to their anxiety, right? So it gets worse. They want to then regress and go back to that fusion with the mother, or what we call a symbiotic relationship, that we are one again. So what Mahler talked about after practicing subphase, she said the next subphase is rapprochement. And what does that mean? The term is, I like to call it emotional refueling. In other words, as the child takes steps away from mom and dad, from that safety that he or she was in, when they get anxious and scared, they run back to mom. So
mhm.
in other words, they're saying, I don't know whether I want to really move away or I want to be back with you, mom. Now, what is the mother's task or the father's task is to understand this, expect it, and tolerate it. Because it's,
What do you mean tolerate it?
yeah, because it's frustrating. Because one minute they want to be picked up, for you
Oh,
to move away. Another minute says, Mommy, let me go. I want to go and play. Leave me alone. Kind of don't
you're,
bother me.
you're describing Shaden right now.
So it's like a mother probably says it, most
Oh,
mothers say this in their head. Come on, make up your mind. What is it you want? You want me to pick you up or let you go? So that's what I mean to understand, empathize, accept, and tolerate.
okay.
Some key words, right? And not get too impatient. I'm not saying that moms and dads are not entitled to get frustrated and angry. But if they are what we call reflective parents, mindful parents, they've already thought about this, they listen to these types of podcasts, or they read on their own, they understand about these developmental tasks, they will be more patient with their kids and they allow it. Okay? So they allow the child to do this back and forth until we reach the third subphase, Mahler called consolidation. In other words, they begin to have a better sense of who they are and they begin to develop what Piaget called object constancy. In other words, out of sight is not out of mind. Just because I don't see mommy, she's not in my visual field, and she's in the kitchen, it doesn't mean she's gone forever. Or just because I ask mommy to let me go so I can explore the family room or whatever, wherever I'm at, or in the park, this self assertion, this move towards autonomy, does not mean I'm losing mommy's love and affection. Because my mom understands what I'm doing, and she does continue to love me. In fact, she encourages me to be on my own as much as I can, as much as my skills and capabilities allow me. But I know I can go back to her when needed. So does that make sense?
It does. And just you saying this, I mean, I consider myself semi-experienced with four children. Not that I exactly know what I'm doing, but when you put it in this term, I can now exactly see with my four kids, and now I'm back in it. Shaden is not even two yet. And I see this, and the light bulb went off for me that I'm like, oh, I get it now. So I can see how there are moments that if I don't understand it, I could get so frustrated or, oh my gosh, what do you want? But just by understanding that why is he doing this? In my mind right now has given me the ability to shift and say, you know what, next time I see him doing this, I get it. I get what he's doing. And I'm going to, what were your 4 words?
Which 4 words? I'm sorry.
You were saying to understand and to
Understand, expect, empathize, and tolerate.
yes, and I like that word, tolerate and
Tolerate,
tolerate.
yes.
So it makes sense, totally.
Absolutely. One quick thing that I forgot to mention was sometimes, in some cases, some children are ahead of themselves. You've seen that. For example, generally boys begin to walk around age 1, but sometimes they may start walking at 10 months. Okay. So if a child is a bit ahead of himself or herself, right? So because of his or her neuromuscular development, he becomes more independent faster than the average kid, right? So they're able to go out there and do things before you think they're ready. So this makes them kind of aware of their separateness from the mother. Yet they may not be emotionally ready to break away from mom, even though they have developed the ability to walk and to maybe say a few words and even lift things, but emotionally they're not ready yet. So what happens is it scares them and they want to run back to the mother. Now, a mother who is calm and collected and understands these things allows it, accepts it, reassures the baby and or the child so he can go back there again. But an anxious and overprotective mother would hold on to the child, and the child feels that, yeah, I guess I wasn't ready. I shouldn't be going there.
Wow.
I shouldn't go out there and explore. I better stay with mom because it's safe. So that's why we say it is important for parents to, if they can, read, study, talk to someone, consult with someone, because they just are better prepared. We're never completely prepared to face all the challenges that our children go through, but the more prepared we are, the better off we are, and so are our children.
Yes. And you understand that the decisions that we make as parents and the personality and how we are really, really profoundly makes an impact on their lives, because you fast forward 30, 40, 50 years even. These are some personality traits you see in adults that tend to, go back to their childhood.
Perfectly said. You know, I was saying today to someone that at times you can see a 40-year-old who behaves as if he or she is a toddler or a teenager. That's what we sometimes call being emotionally arrested at that earlier phase. Okay, so they may have physically grown, they have even gone to school and become very educated, but emotionally they're ill-equipped. They're not ready to face. And so as soon as there is a conflict at place of employment, there is a conflict in a relationship with someone they're dating, they want to break up, they want to run away from it, and they come up with all kinds of reasons and excuses by externalizing the source of problem. It's not me, it's the person I'm dating, it's the job or the supervisor. I better quit. I can always move back in with my parents, right? So these types of regressive behaviors or these types of defense mechanisms, like externalizing the source of difficulty outside of me, are not uncommon, unfortunately. Okay. In fact, as we now go to the next phase and talk about adolescence, we will see why. And then next podcast we will do about substance abuse problems among teenagers. We will see why substance abuse and alcohol problem are such a big issue and problem almost in every society, right? But I'm not going to get ahead of myself. We'll talk about that. So let's talk about now the second separation individuation.
What age is this? I want to prepare myself as my kids are getting older. Where is this in life?
Absolutely. I'm going to mark it. So the first parenting we did, parenting one, was age 0 to about 1.5. Then this first separation individuation we're talking about toddlers, about 1.5 to about all the way to about 12. Okay.
Oh, okay.
In other words, this second separation individuation. Adolescence is from age 12 to 18 or 19. Right? So that's why we call them teenagers, teens, like from 13 all the way to 19. Now, this is perhaps the most challenging phase of human development, not just for parents. Okay? We all go through all kinds of changes. We go through transitions. In fact, if time allows, one time we will talk about what I call 5 emotional challenges of human life. But today we're talking about one of those challenges, perhaps the most challenging phase of development. It's called adolescence, 12 to 18 or 19, right? And we can call it second separation individuation, because the first one was when we are able to walk, talk, and do things. So we're moving from absolute dependence to relative independence. But now, what happens to adolescents and what happens to their parents, right? It's a very stormy time, but with some understanding and training, parents can come out of this phase in one piece, and so will their children.
Dr. Behrooz, I got to go through this 4 times. I will be very honest. I was an extremely difficult teenager for my parents. Extremely difficult. Sometimes I think back to the things that I've done and I just want to hide. So I know too, as you go into this, and I want this information is so valuable, especially at a time during this pandemic, that parents are truly struggling with the changes that are coming every which way, and kids that are at home, that this information will hopefully give them a little help, a little glimpse. I don't ever want to fear what is ahead of me. I'm a big fan of learning. And if you learn, then you can navigate through these times. But this room that I'm sitting in, that I talked to you about when we first came, I have a feeling we're going to have some arguments in this room.
Absolutely. He's 9, right?
The
And
first
just,
one's 9. Then there's another one behind it, another one behind, another one behind
right.
it.
So you can actually anticipate it in a couple of years, and you actually use a good example. You use yourself as an example. In fact, it's like almost like you want to go apologize to your parents.
I have. I said, I'm sorry.
So you have made amends. But they also understand because they were teenagers and they've seen other teenagers. And one thing that Winnicott said, we talked about Winnicott, he was a British child and adult analyst, very big on parenting. One thing he did say to parents is, because they said, what do I do with my teenager? He said, don't try to fix them because there's nothing wrong with them. You see, just understand that this is a normal phase of their life and it's a normal part of their development. With some exceptions, yes, we do have adolescents who are troubled, who have behavioral problems. They may even sadly suffer from psychological or psychiatric disorders. Those need professional help. But don't try to think of your teenager as if he or she is sick and I need to fix them.
When you say fix them, what do you mean by that? Like what, that they lock themselves in their room, or they have attitude, or they're rolling their eyes? Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. The hallmarks of adolescence are, if I can put them in 2 words,
Okay.
defiance and dependence. They may sound inconsistent or contradictory, but the most important trait of an adolescent is being defiant. And we will talk about why are they so defiant? Why are they so oppositional? Why do they talk back so much? Right? And at the same time, they're still as needy as when they were 5 or 6 years old.
That's so true. Why? Right? Oh my gosh, this is so true. Tell me why I was like this.
Right. Or why your kids will be in the near future, or some parents are listening to us and they're actually literally experiencing it. You see, we said that a child needs to separate from mom and dad,
right,
in order to individuate, to become an individual.
Okay.
As long as I stay one with my mom or dad, then who am I? Okay. If I just identify with mom and dad, then I'm them. I have never developed my own person or my own sense of self. So I have to individuate. But this is not a smooth transition. Okay. As we said about the toddler, who's excited about being able to go explore this room, that room, or go to the park and do things, he or she also gets anxious. So do adolescents. Now, adolescents are actually faced with much more difficult challenges than toddlers are. Because what happens is now at this age, they're also going through hormonal changes, boys and girls, we know that, right?
Yes.
So they're going through these biological changes. They have no control over it, right? It affects their mood, they're turning into sexual beings. They begin to have questions about who they are, their identity in general, but also their sexual identity in particular. Sometimes I've heard from parents who ask me, my daughter is asking me if she's gay or she's bisexual or she's heterosexual. So they're going to go through that, right? They're going to be confused about it. Our job is to understand, again, expect, empathize, and tolerate, meaning help them through this, help them figure themselves out. Because on one hand, they act, you've seen that, maybe you remember yourselves or your friends, they act as if they know it all, they can do it all, and they don't need us. We're dumb, we're stupid, right? As parents, we're old-fashioned or too traditional. On the other hand comes says, Mom, can I have your car? Mom, can you do this for me? Dad, can you please give me $100?
Oh my gosh. Wow. This is like so right on, spot on.
Right, because it really does happen. All of us have gone through it. We may not remember about ourselves. If we go ask our parents, they will tell us. Or we can see it in our friends who are having teenagers because you don't have them yet. Go ahead. You wanted to ask a question.
I remember the frustration of my parents and many tears, and I've apologized for all of them. I have friends who have fairly easy teenagers, adolescents. And I have friends who struggle with their teenagers. How do you, in that time that you're so frustrated and you're hurt as a parent, when you say that to empathize and to understand and to help them guide through this, how do you do that at a time that there's so much pain and frustration? Your sweet little baby that you brought home from the hospital that was so cute and you were cheeks and you were holding and cuddling has now turned into somebody that you may not even recognize.
Or like at times.
Or thank you for saying that.
I know, I had to say it because I know it's hard for a parent to say that, or can't wait until they leave the house. Why don't they grow up and move out,
Yes.
I miss them too. So that's our own ambivalence. On one hand, we can wait until the kids are grown and on their own and leave the house so we can take a break. On the other hand, we miss them. That's why parents go through what's called empty nest syndrome. So the reverse of that, or the other side of that coin, is the adolescent who is thinking and acting as if he can do anything and everything by himself, doesn't need parents. On the other hand, he or she really is not ready yet and needs mom and dad. So this dependency is confusing to them because they're afraid that if they identify with us, with the parents, they lose themselves, right? Instead of understanding that, no, it's okay to still need my mom and dad, but I'm not going back to when I was 2 or 3. I'm not regressing to that symbiotic phase. And it's okay because this reliance is temporary and my parents have no intention of keeping me dependent on them. They actually are excited and hopeful that I move out, go to school, maybe to another city, another state, become my own individual and have a relationship with them. I can go back to them. The same way we said that about the toddler, that the toddler knows that if I go from this room to the other room, I trust my mom and dad because I can always go back to the other room and find them. Or if I call my mom or dad, they will come back to me and they will protect me and they take care of me, right? So a teenager needs to understand that. Now, but it's our job. They can't figure this out on their own. Our job to help them understand that. Okay? So when I said empathize, to answer your question, to empathize does not mean that you're not entitled to get frustrated and angry or to be ready to pull your hair out. But those are the times that, if necessary, as we talked in Parenting 1, you ask the other parent to step in. If you're getting too worked up, too frustrated because you've spent all day with them, or you have been dealing with your daughter or your son over this matter to the point that you no longer can be as patient as you would like to be, you ask your husband to come and help. Like, for example, say, Bruce, could you please come and do this or take care of this? Or he becomes aware and he says, honey, why don't you go do this and let me handle this. Let me take care of it. Let me finish it. Or I'll do this. So you need a break. This is why we call this parenting, meaning there's more than hopefully one parent. There are single parents, but hopefully we have a partner who can help us during these very challenging and difficult times. Go ahead.
Would you say that from what I'm taking with the adolescents, the calmer a parent is, the more level they are, that's going to work to the advantage during that adolescent stage? Like, are you allowed to get angry, upset with your teenager?
Yes to both questions. So it would be very nice, almost ideal, if we can stay calm throughout their adolescence. But that's more like a fantasy than reality. So the reason I said yes to both questions is, yes, you're allowed, and yes, you do get upset and angry and frustrated. But the answer is, how do you express that anger and frustration?
Mm-hmm.
Because after all, we are role models for them. Remember, we talked about in Parenting one way children learn, not only about how to deal with the world, but also about themselves and their own capabilities, is by taking mom and dad in, by internalizing and incorporating parents, the way they do things, the way they handle things. Remember, we talked about that.
Yes.
So how you handle your frustration and anger, even in relation to them, teaches them how to process and deal with their own anger and frustration. When they're frustrated because they don't get an A in a class, when they're frustrated because I asked this girl out, let's say it's a 17-year-old boy, and the girl said no, and I feel rejected, hurt, let down, and all of that. How do I deal with anger, irritability, and sadness? Because they have already faced it. How did mom and dad deal with it? So yes, the calmer you are, the more collected you are, the better prepared you are, like we said. Do understand, expect, empathize, and tolerate. So the better you can handle them. But yes, you can get frustrated and angry. And what you do, you tell your teenager, I'm very upset with you because we have dealt with this many times. And even though I understand what you're going through, but it doesn't mean I like some of the ways you are dealing with this problem. And I need you to be respectful of your curfew or what your dad and I have expected from you. So this way, you're not denying your anger, but you're using it in a productive, constructive way by being assertive. And this is what they need to learn to do in order to go out there and be able to deal with a difficult, demanding boss or a difficult, challenging boyfriend or girlfriend and so forth. That's how they learn.
It almost seems like even with the pandemic, from the little ones to the older ones, with all the changes right now, they're learning. Because I know we've talked about mental health and so many people concerned about what is going to come from this time with the kids, the schools shut down and people being in quarantine and all sorts of things, how our behavior now will truly impact them. So many of us for years to come.
Absolutely.
If they see mommy and daddy flustered in the house right now with everything and things are chaotic, then they will pick up on that energy. If they find a way to be more mindful and deal with their stress in a different way, then they will carry that with them. And God forbid there's another pandemic in their lifetime, they'll handle it in a way that we taught them.
Right. In fact, you brought up an interesting point, which reminds me of one of our podcasts. Remember when we talked about, and I'm sure your listeners will remember, we talked about the emotional impact of COVID-19 on families and couples. One of the unfortunate side effects of this pandemic has been us being deprived of most of our social interactions, most of our pleasurable and exciting activities, going out to concerts, for kids to go out, interact with their friends, play basketball, be a part of a maybe swimming team and so forth. Because they're deprived of it, they don't have these channels to use their energy in a healthy, constructive way. Most of their frustrations, anger, and irritability are with them at home with the parents. They're all stuck at home, right? So I'm bringing this up because with the next topic that we're going to talk about, substance abuse and alcohol problem among teenagers, is related to what we're talking about. In other words, those teenagers who can't get through this phase in a healthy way and they don't have parents who allow, facilitate, and encourage for them to become gradually independent, they would gravitate towards substances, toward drugs, or other unhealthy habits, okay? Because they need something to help them with their anxiety, their fear, their sadness, their frustration. Because remember that the world out there is not easy. It's filled with challenges. Even for grown-ups, it's very difficult, let alone for a teenager who's faced with internal demands, external demands, hormonal changes. So they begin to feel that I expect, my parents expect, and the culture and society expect that I need to go out there and be independent. But really deep inside, I don't think I'm ready to leave the comfort and safety of mom and dad's home and go out there and be on my own and face all these challenges. So what do? They have to find something that helps them. And if that thing is not one of the healthy means we have talked about, art, music, athletic activities, friendships, and so forth, guess what? They do gravitate toward drugs and alcohol. In fact, one of the things that I also need to quickly mention, I forgot to mention, is one of the things that helps your teenager to become independent of you is the availability of friends.
Oh, for a teenager, you want them to have lots of friends.
Absolutely. Of course, healthy friends. Friends with similar type of...
That's the key, the healthy friends.
Yeah, and it's kind of difficult these days to have that kind of resource available to you. But what I mean by that is, for the same way that a toddler, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old relies on his toys, on his video games and so forth to tolerate absence of his mother, even though temporarily mom goes to the kitchen to prepare something, or mom may even have to go to work and I have to stay with my babysitter, but I have my toys to help me stay without mom, tolerate her absence, and not get too anxious, right? We use toys and other means as what, again, Winnicott called transitional objects. Teenagers now need to gradually but progressively rely on their friends, their peers, their classmates, their athletic activities, to rely less and less on mom and dad, so they can have the strength and courage to leave the house. So, but sometimes we may prevent them from socializing, being with their friends. I am not talking about not supervising them, not making sure that they have interactions with good people, peers with the same standards, with the same value system, but we don't want them to just depend on us and their siblings. We want them to find interests outside of the house, the immediate family, so they can transition. So then the interest in having a car, dating someone, having a job, going to a university that's not close to home allows them to move away, but having the same trust that they had when they were younger, that I know where my mom and dad are. They're a phone call away, or we can FaceTime, or I can always talk to them if I run into conflicts, or if I need a little bit of money, or I need their advice. So this is very important, that we allow, encourage, and facilitate social connections, being able to relate and connect with people of the same age, okay? Because sometimes you hear, and I've heard it, parents complain that my teenage son, my teenage daughter doesn't want to do anything with me anymore. They don't want to go any place with us. And I say, because they have no interest in common with you. In fact, it's more fun with their friends. And third, but the most important one, you as a parent or parents need to understand that that's actually important in that transition going from home to the outside world. They need to have these friends to rely on so they can leave the house and become independent individuals.
I will have your voice playing in my head in about 5 or 6 years when I'm going to be facing all of that. But I appreciate you taking this time, because the more that we learn and we understand and really get information, I really do believe it's so valuable for parents, because if you learn those right things and you could make those shifts and adjustments, it will make a big, big difference in growing these beautiful humans to be healthy healthy adults. Dr. Bernous, I appreciate your time, and I cannot wait to talk about adolescence and substance abuse.
My pleasure. Good to be with you and your viewers again.
You've been listening to It Is What It Is with Shali Zomarodi. You can join in and ask your questions live on Shali's Facebook or Instagram page. You can find so much more by following Shali on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and by visiting shalz.com.